To do so. Grahame.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Mr Davies, and good morning, Secretary of State. As the Chairman's indicated, I've got some questions about congestion at ports and borders. I wonder if I might just begin by asking a general question of the Secretary of State, and that's in relation to before the end of the transition period on the 31st of December, a lot of background work went on behind the scenes to try to ensure that goods would continue to flow across the border smoothly. Could I ask you, what is your assessment? What assessment have you made of the flow of exports and indeed imports to and from the UK since the 1st of January?
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I have sat in, I think, 180 different EXO meetings. This is the Brexit operation meetings, which planned for the end of the transition period. And you will have seen, including government's own reasonable worst case projections, and certainly many times mentioned in the newspapers, talk of queues of 10, 20, 30, 40 miles of lorries, none of which we saw not as a result of the end of the transition period. Of course, we did see all of that and more when the French border was closed, but unrelated to Brexit, to do with COVID, in the lead up to Christmas. So in terms of border flow, I can tell you, the committee, that the latest information is nearly 6,000 trucks a day, which is probably now about 1,000 under where you might expect it to be at this time of year. It was last year. It's somewhat difficult to be definitive in terms of what we'd expect, simply for the fact that there was a lot of stockpiling going on because there was a lot of concern about disruption, which hasn't materialised. But of course, that could be because there was stockpiling going on in the January. We didn't see problems. So good flow. I'm having a look here, for example, on Friday. It looks like around 5,800, 5,900 departures of HGVs across the short straits. So that's both Eurotunnel and the Port of Dover. And the other thing that's worth reporting to the committee is in the same week, that last week, turnbacks, so this would be for preparation for Brexit terms, or the end of the transition period, would be for non-compliance of paperwork. But actually, these turnbacks now also include lorries which turn up where the haulier hasn't had a COVID test, were running in that last week at under 3%. So very, very low levels of turnback, and the flow is come up throughout the whole of January like this. We're nearly at normal levels.
I want to come back, thanks for that, Sarah. I want to come back in relation to congestion, because certainly myself and other members of the committee are receiving conflicting reports from road hauliers in our own constituencies about the problems and issues. But I want to ask a specific question about the relaxation of HGV rules, the driver's hours rules, that the statutory rest periods. Traditionally or historically, when these regulations have been relaxed, it's been for a very specific reason and for very particular sections of the industry. But the latest relaxation covers practically every professional heavy goods vehicle driver in the country, including those delivering to the UK from other countries. And we're all aware that the fundamental purpose of these regulations is road safety of drivers and other road users. So I'm very interested in hearing your view. I mean, clearly the government's adopted a very broad definition within the regulations of exceptional circumstances. So that means both circumstances arising from COVID that you alluded to earlier, from the pandemic, or indeed from the withdrawal of the UK from the European Union. So that is bringing about issues of congestion. I want to come back to that in a second. But on this point about statutory rest periods, I'd be interested in your thoughts on that. And can I just say, Unite the Union, my union, are not averse to this, but they do feel it's in everyone's interests, of drivers, of hauliers, of moving trade, if they're involved in the discussions under the terms of that relaxation.
Yeah. Look, first of all, just on the congestion thing, I really do want to nail this. I'm just actually looking at on a separate screen here. traffic at the port, at Eurotunnel port, and it looks like a very standard day. It's how it would have looked last year. This is the gate where traffic enters in. There are no great queues, and as I say, I see no evidence that traffic is not flowing at all. So any reports of congestion, I want to hear about at DFT. I monitor this. I have twice a day SIPREP reports. I've been studying them intensely since the beginning of the year. We have no, and we have a unit which hasn't yet stood down looking at this. We have no reports. So if you have any, please let me have them. On driver's hours, look, this is not. I think I can reassure your colleagues. This is not something that I intend to leave as a permanent situation. We have not one but two potential large disruptors. One was, of course, Brexit, the additional paperwork, which, as I say, against the kind of well, not against, but we didn't get to the reasonable worst case scenarios of paperwork. It's very much settled down, with the exception of two issues that I no doubt will discuss later: fish and Northern Ireland, or GB, Northern Ireland or GB to air. But the flow through the short straits is very smooth. But that was one issue. The other, though, is the COVID testing. And the COVID testing was all taking place at Manston. So there was a flow issue there. What I've done subsequently is brought that back to the information and advice sites for hauliers that were set up for Brexit, but we're now using 39 of them to pre-test hauliers before they get into Kent in order to better manage this traffic flow and ultimately to stop traffic from having to reroute perhaps 40 or even 60 miles to Manston in order to get to the ports. So it is only temporary. It's only in place to March. I don't anticipate it being renewed unless there's some other measure, but we couldn't run the risk with France, the Netherlands, and perhaps other countries requiring these lateral flow tests of drivers ending up getting stuck because they were waiting for test results somewhere.
Sorry, Chair, I know you want to move on, and I've got a couple of questions I want to ask, but can I just respond to that? Because the Secretary of State there mentioned the congestion in Kent and the efforts that were being made to carry out tests elsewhere, presumably in Thurrock, which I think is in Essex. But myself and other members of the committee have received reports that, not just congestion issues in Kent that were reported on the TV news, but the impact's been felt further afield. And I'd received reports from drivers who couldn't find places to park to take their statutory rest break that I mentioned earlier, due to service areas being full of drivers trying to get COVID tests and customs documents checked. And in one instance, over 200 drivers were queuing outside of Thurrock services. So, I mean, there's road safety issues there. So I wanted to flag that up with you, but, I've made that point. Can I quickly ask you as well, because another point that's been in the news, Secretary of State, over the last couple of days, and I wonder if you can say something about the challenges that there are at the Irish Sea border and how you are addressing them in terms of, ensuring that we have a clear flow of trade.
Yeah, so just to come back on the congestion point, sometimes, and this has always happened, before COVID and before, you'll always sometimes get some lorries and locations. It's very important that we have as many locations as possible for testing to take place. As I say, I've got 39 outside of Kent now, in addition to the Kent site. So we're trying to spread it as far as possible. Whenever there are any reports, we're into them very, very quickly indeed. And I'm even looking at, whether we temporarily need to open additional sites for testing and those types of things. But by any measure, I should tell the committee we've now tested 150,000 hauliers with lateral flow tests with those results and sent them across. I think by any measure, it's been a pretty successful process, having cleared something like 10,000 lorries in Kent. And you're very welcome to pass any details of congestion to me in the department. I'll absolutely jump all over it, including looking at whether we need to provide advice for hauliers to go elsewhere and the rest of it. And then I think that the second part of your question was with regard to what's happening perhaps on the on Holyhead route. Was that the point you were?
Well, I know some of these issues are HMRC things, but
yes,
it's been very much in the news about the challenges at the Irish sea border. And I was wondering what you could do, Secretary of State, in your capacity. How you've identified those problems and what actions you're taking to alleviate them.
Yes. So with regards to the Northern Ireland crossing, as you say, it's sort of slightly outside of the transport specific remit in that it's an HMRC issue to do with the Northern Ireland protocol, and the committee members will have noted that some of the checks have been temporarily suspended, particularly I think on animal origin at Larne and Belfast. And I know that the CDL is meeting with his counterpart today, the EU Commission Vice President, to have a look at this. Some of these issues are things which are just sort of smoothed out in the initial opening days after the transition period. So we were seeing some stories about supermarkets and things which we're not seeing so much now. But others, of course, play into, unfortunately, what we saw happen last Friday with the EU Commission saying that it was going to make changes which it then reversed on. And I think the meeting today will focus on trying to get sensible measures in place, because I don't think we should be using Article 16 on our side, or indeed on the EU side. We just need to make sure the border is capable of flowing smoothly. It's not a sort of traffic management per se issue on those on the border. So I'm not sort of ideally placed to give you the answers about the veterinary side, DEFRA, the HMRC side, and of course the aspects of the Northern Ireland Protocol that the Chancellor of Berkshire and Lancaster is dealing with. I just wanted to, just in finishing off, to mention it was Waterbrook, which was an HMRC transit site, which has attracted the only queues that I've seen at all in Kent, which was a traffic management issue to do with people at the time not being able to get into Sevington. It was on a single day, and it was dealt with a couple of weeks ago.
Thanks. I wonder if I, just very quickly, just finally, and it's related to your previous answer about Northern Ireland, and some of these issues are not exactly traffic management issues, they're broader issues. But you may recall before Christmas on the 21st of December, you told a joint meeting of the Transport Committee and the International Trade Committee that there were no immediate, in your opinion, there was no immediate role for the military to help alleviate congestion at UK ports. And you did also mention there was a peak in demand before Christmas for global container shipping. So what is the current status? Is that still your opinion? And are there any circumstances when the military would be called on to assist in? Would you acknowledge the increasing costs of shipping containers and the impact that's going to have on prices of commodities in the shops?
Yes, but it's a global cost. It's not actually to do specifically with Brexit, for example. Globally, and this happened, if you remember, at the container ports before the end of the transition period, from San Francisco to the UK to the Far East, ports have been extremely busy, and the number of containers available have been restricted, and therefore prices had gone up in order to deal with this. And we did have some issues, if you recall, at Felixstowe and elsewhere, which I'm sure you're referring to. I had said at the time, if the situation didn't improve, then I would stop at nothing, including signing what's called a MACA agreement to call in the military. It wasn't necessary. The situation has subsided somewhat, and there are no plans to do that at all. And having said that, when I did need the military, which was when the French closed the borders before Christmas, I had no hesitation in calling in the military. In fact, I want to place on record to the committee my sincere gratitude and thanks to the military, working with NHS Test and Trace. They got in 2 or 3 days, 10,000 lorries cleared in Kent. It was quite a phenomenal operation. And of course, I'd always, they are the ultimate backup. But no, the ports are busy globally, with higher prices globally, but goods are flowing and flowing at near normal levels, which, given the pandemic and everything else going on, has been miraculous. And I think that actually the transport sector the freight sector is rarely sort of cheered on as heroes when people think of the key workers and the heroes. They aren't necessarily the first people we're thinking of, but they should be. They've kept the medicines flowing, they've kept the food on the shelves, and they've done a terrific job under enormous pressure throughout this whole period.
Thanks very much indeed. I'll hand back to the chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Grahame, thank you ever so much.